Okay everyone, so now we are learning the components of CLR. CLR stands for Common Language Runtime, and the CLR is very important in the .NET because whenever we write the code, that code is converted to the intermediate language after first compilation. Now this intermediate language is running on the CLR. So we need the CLR to run the intermediate language, and whole program is monitored by the CLR. So first of all, we are going with the first component here, and that component is the code manager. As the name signifies, code manager means managing the code. Let's say we have developed some application, some GUI application into the .NET. Let's say this is the application, and here let's say is some text and some text box is applied, some button is applied, and for that let's say we have done some coding behind that. So here is the coding environment where we have done some coding. Now in this coding there can be multiple things. Let's say from where the library will be included, from where the memory will be managed. So that all things are taken care by the code manager. So first thing we can say that code manager manage the code during execution. Means when the code is running at that time, it is totally managing the code, and this is done by the code manager. Now what do you mean by the management of code? Let's say we have declared some of the variables, we have declared some of the objects. Now declaring them the memory, providing them the memory, so that is taken care by the code manager. So we can say that code manager allocate memory to the objects. Many of time we have seen that we create the form. Let's say this is our form 1. Now in my application, let's say I'm using one form, but there can be multiple forms. Now what is that form 1? So these are derived from the forms. So form 1, form 2. So these classes are present and their objects are created. Now whenever you declare a form, so it takes some memory. So while running, it needs a memory. So code manager is going to manage the complete code and provide the memory. So this is the first component of CLR, which manage the code and allocate the memory. Now the next component of CLR is the type checker. As the name signifies, type checker means it is going to check the type. But which type? We know that in the programming we declare many variables. Let's say I have declared one variable a. Now that can be of some type, let's say integer. So this is of integer type. Let's say if I am declaring some other variable, let's say b, and that can be of double type. Or I am declaring any other variable, let's say c, and that c variable is of string type. So there can be multiple variables of different type. So whenever we are using those variables inside the program, now checking their types. Let's say if I have declared a variable of integer type, but in the program I am using in the string, so that can be the wrong option. So checking the types of those variable is taken care by the type checker. So we can say that it check the data type of variable. So in the .NET, whatever the variables we declare, then these types are checking is taken care by the type checker. Now afterward we are learning the next component of CLR, and that is the debug engine. Debugging means finding the errors, and debug engine means the engine which is going to find out the errors. We know that there is a syntax and semantic which is supported by every language. Let's say we have write some code into the .NET, and this is our code. Inside the code, if we have made certain error, now those errors can be checked and that message should be shown to the user. So that is the task of debug engine, means debugging, finding the problems into the code. So we can say that find and remove bugs from the code. So whatever the program we are writing, in that if some kind of errors are there, maybe we have done some logical mistakes. Let's say we have not applied some of the syntax, we have not applied some comma if it is required, or some symbol. Then those errors are easily detected, means we find them and then remove them. So that is the task of the debug engine, finding the problems and then rectify them. So this is the important component of the CLR. Now we are discussing the next component of CLR, and that is the class loader. Class loader means somebody who is loading the class, but which class they load. Let's say we are taking some example here. So this is the code which I have written. I am a programmer. So this code I have written, or maybe I have created a project into the .NET. So this is called the source code. Now this source code we have compiled. We know that in the .NET there is a two-step compilation. So let's say we have compiled it. Now after compilation, this is converted to the intermediate language. Now this intermediate language can be called as MSIL, Microsoft Intermediate Language, or CSIL, or it can be called the managed code. So these all are the same name. This intermediate language is very much secure. We can just send it to the customer or maybe the client, or we can send this to the native one. Let's say I have written some code and I don't want to share that code. So I will convert to the intermediate language and send to the other person. Other person can execute it, but it cannot steal my code. And to execute it, it requires the CLR. So here comes in, means this intermediate language or intermediate code is now loaded into the environment. So this intermediate language is, let's say, is loaded. Now this is the client machine. On the client machine we have given this intermediate language. Now here it will be having the CLR, and CLR will be having the class loader. So you assume that if I am giving you a exe file, now you double click on the exe file and it run on your system. Or let's say if I am giving you a project, you double click on that, the project start on your system. Now who start on your system? Who loads that project? Who loads all those files? That is the task of class loader. Means if I am giving you the intermediate language or the code, that you double click and open it, and who is opening that code, linking all the libraries with that, this is the task of class loader. Because every project we are making, that is nothing but the class files. Now those class files open in the environment whenever we click them. So to run the project we need the class loader. So we can say that class loader loads data in runtime. Means our project is now loaded into the runtime and we can now run this project. So this is the task of the class loader. So class loader loads the data into runtime. Now we know that the source code is compiled to intermediate language. Now this intermediate language is loaded by the class loader, and afterward CLR also contain one JIT compiler. Now this JIT compiler is again the part of CLR that convert the code into the native code or the machine code. Now this code run on the operating system. So this JIT is another compiler. So CLR contain the class loader. So first of all the intermediate language is loaded into the system. Then afterward JIT compiler compile it and convert to the native code, and then project run on the system. So this way the class loader is very important, because if I am sending the intermediate language code to anybody, now that can open in their environment. Though afterward the JIT compiler work and execute that program. So this is the task of class loader. Next component of CLR is the exception manager. Whenever we make the program, there are multiple times of exception come. Exception and the error both are different. Now we should understand. Let's say if there is a syntax given to us that after declaring the integer we has to put the comma. That is the type problem. It is an error. Means let's say if I am not providing the comma, I am providing let's say underscore afterward. So compiler will show me the error. So this is the task of type checker. Now errors are not the exception. Exception is something different. Let's say if I give you the example, which is the divide by 0. Let's say there are two variables, one is A and one is B. Now user has asked to enter some value. Now user may give the value of A as 4 and B as 2, but there are some users, they give the value of B as 0, or maybe in the program we are calculating A divided by B. Now if I divide 4 by 0, we know that it is undefined. There is nothing present which is divided by 0. So that is a exception. It is not error, it is exception, because logically program is correct. But user is giving such option that program may lead to some inconsistent state. Program may halt or program may go to infinity. So it is not stopping. So this is called the exception. There is one more exception. Let's say array out of bound. Let's say you have declared some array, let's say A5. Now we know that there are 5 memory we are having, but if anybody is going to access the 6th memory out of that, we have reserved the 5 memory, but you are trying to allocate or take out the 6th value, means 6th memory, which is not there. So such type of problem comes into the exception, because we know that if we declare some array, let's say this is the array and there are the 5, let's say this is 0, this is 1, 2, 3 and 4. So here we are having the 5 memory which are reserved, but if anybody, let's say, is going to allocate A6 and that is equal to 10. Now logically it is correct, but yeah, it is incorrect thing, because A6, where is A6? The 6th block we are not having, we have only reserved for the 5 blocks. So this is an exception. So in such cases, divide by 0, array out of bound, the exception occur, and this exception is taken care by the exception manager. So we can say that exception manager handle the exception in both managed and the unmanaged code. Now here it is handling the managed and the unmanaged code. We know that whenever we are talking about the intermediate language, now that intermediate language is called the managed code. So whenever we are converting our source code to the intermediate language, this is the managed code, and whenever we are converting directly to the native code, so it is called the unmanaged code. So native code and intermediate language, these are the unmanaged and the managed code. Here in the diagram we can see that when the source code is converted or the compiled to the intermediate language, this is called the managed, or if the source code is directly converted to the native, we are not going to the intermediate, then it is called the unmanaged code. So source code directly converted to the native code, that is done by the normal languages like C, VB. So here the unmanaged code, the source code is converted to the native code directly, and the languages like we have taken are C, VB. So these are the languages, and when we convert the source code to the intermediate language, we are not converting directly to the native code. Now this is called the managed code, and the languages which are supporting is .NET or the Java. So these are supporting the two-step compilation, or here they are having the managed code. So both the code are managed by the exception manager. Now we are learning the next component of CLR, that is thread support. Thread support, that means there are some threads that it is supporting. But what is that? Many of the times we have heard that multi-programming, multi-threading. Now we should understand that. Let's say we are having different windows open. So let's say I have opened one game, or I have opened, let's say, some music parallelly, Let's say I am using some drawing software. So these are three independent tasks that I am doing. So this is called the multi-programming. Means whenever we are opening the multiple programs of different types. Let's say we have playing the game and we are listening to the music and we are doing the drawing. So these all are the independent tasks. Here we say it is the multi-programming. But what is multi-threading? Let's say the example of Google Chrome. Now we know that this is our Google Chrome. We assume it. In the Google Chrome, we are having different tabs. Let's say this is the tab 1. In the tab 1, let's say I am opening my Gmail. In the tab 2, I am opening the Facebook. Let's say in the tab 3, I am doing some search operation. Now these are the tabs of same process. So this is called thread, means a process subparts. So Google Chrome means the web page. This is a complete process or a program and it is having multiple subparts. So this is called thread. So whenever we are doing the same type of task together, they are called the multi-threading. So here if we talk about the CLR, thread support is the component. That means whenever you are making a program where we are having multiple threads and they are executing parallelly, so that is taken care by the thread support, or we can say that it supports the multi-threading. If we differentiate the multi-programming and multi-threading, so whenever we are doing the different types of tasks which are not interrelated, then it is called the multi-programming. But whenever we are doing the tasks which are similar and which are interlinked, then they are called the multi-threading. Let's say we are making a project. In that project, there are files which are of same type and which require each other. So this is called the threads of a project. So the complete project is like a program. So if we are dealing with such small things, so this is called the multi-threading, and this multi-threading is taken care by the thread support. Now we are discussing the next component of CLR, that is the security checker. We know that there are various things which comes under the security. Let's say if we talk about the memory of our project. Now memory means, let's say we are having some database where all the files of user are saved. Maybe it is the database which contain some of the user ID and passwords. So that memory cannot be accessed outside. So that is the task of security checker, that which security permissions are given. So anybody cannot access everything. If we are making a .NET project, then it is a responsibility of the security checker, which is the part of CLR, that nobody can access the things which their permissions are not granted. Let's say if we are having the intermediate language code. Now this intermediate language code, everybody should not be granted with access. Or if we talk about the memory, everybody should not be going to the memory so that they can fetch the record. So this is how the security checker create some of the firewall so that nobody can cross it and it maintain the security. So we can say that security checker restrict access to system resources. And what are these resources? We know that memory is the major resource. Resource helps us a project or the program or application to run. So whenever you make any of the application, it needs some resources just like memory. So those memory should be totally secured, or the intermediate language which we take should be totally secured. So all the resources should be secured. That should be taken care by the security checker. Now we are learning the last component of CLR, which is the garbage collector. Garbage collector. As the name garbage means the things which are not used or which are unnecessary. Now in the program, what is unnecessary? Let's say I have made some project, very huge project. There I have used various variables various objects. Now, while I was running, then those are no more required. So they are unnecessary consuming the space. If we are going to the .NET, it always says us, these are the unused variables, these are the unused object. What is that? It basically want to say that they are no more required. You are not using them, so better to delete. This is the part of automatic memory management. In the .NET, it automatically manages the memory, and with the help of this garbage collector, it collects the information of all those objects which are not in use. So how it is collecting the information? First of all, we should understand how the objects are created into the memory. We should note that just like we are having the stack, similarly we are having the heap. So there is a memory that is called the heap. Now in this heap memory, the objects are taken. Let's say if I have allocated the first object, so let's say O1 is our first object. So first object is there. Now let's say object 2 or the object 3. So these objects are created. Now whenever we are keep on creating the objects, they are going to be stored into the heap. Now, maybe this third object is now no more required and this first object is no more required. So, how the .NET perform the action? It is having the garbage collector. Now, garbage collector periodically check heap memory for unused objects. Now the periodically means at some time span. Let's say we are saying after every 5 minutes. So after every 5 minutes, garbage collector is going to check the heap. Now we know that in the heap we are having the objects. And let's say this time object 1 and object 3 are unused. So garbage collector will collect the information, and now is the next task. Next task is it automatically free those spaces which are no longer required, or we can say that it automatically take the objects and just delete them or free their memory. So that means the objects which are free means they are unused. Now their information is collected and just their memory is now freed. So this memory can be taken by the other objects. So this is how the garbage collector work, and with the help of this garbage collector we are having the automatic memory management. So if we talk about the components of CLR, so first of all we are having the code manager which manage the code, then we are having the type checker which checks the type, then the debug engine which find the bug from the system, then afterward it is the class loader. Whenever we convert the code to the intermediate language, now that code, intermediate code, should be loaded. This is the task of class loader. Then is the exception manager. There are some exceptions which is managed by the exception manager, like divide by zero, array out of bound. Then is the thread support. Whenever we are having the same type of processes, then that supporting is done by the thread support. Security checker means the resources should be secure like the memory. Then is the garbage collector. Garbage collector provides the automatic memory management by continuously checking the heap and just freeing their memory. So this is all about the components of CLR.